Now we're going to talk about setting up the press. So it's very important before you start printing and inking that you have your paper, it's torn, you have your plate, in this case our Xerox, before it's inked, and we're going to set up the press before we actually begin inking and printing. This way your hands are clean, everything is ready to go, and we're going to look at the grid on the press at this point. There's a sheet of plexiglass that's on top of the plexiglass that is the bed of the press. All right, and underneath all of that is this grid. And you can see right here is the center of the grid and 1-inch squares with the red marks and the center here marked. So what I'm going to do first actually is to put the paper down and to try to center that paper. So I have the red marks. It's a little bit over the red mark at this point, and this is the paper that we just tore. We have the blue marks here, so I can count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this is 4. So if I want to center it exactly, I can put it right at about that point. Then I'm going to use a Sharpie magic marker, and the Sharpie brand is a brand that does not dissolve in water, so that's very important. This marker will dissolve in alcohol, and what that means is that we can wash this off in alcohol, but when the damp paper comes down and the damp felts, this will not dissolve, so we can continue to use these marks. So that would be our marks for our paper. Now then I can visually, as well as with the grid, and you may not be in a situation where you always have a grid, I can center the Xerox print. So I have the blue mark here. I have only one square, and we're 1 square in, so this is a little easier to read. We don't have to count the squares. And then I can also make the marks for our Xerox. So now keep in mind that everything is going to be wet when we start to print the Xerox and the paper. So everything is going to stretch a bit, and most of the time it will stretch in its long dimension more than the wide dimension. So, you know, just keep that in mind, but at least this way we have everything and it's easier to handle everything instead of when we go to press and this is all full of ink and a little bit more difficult to manage. We also want to make sure that, I would remind you to put the top on these markers so that they don't dry out, because once they do, that's it. So don't lose the marker, and also things like this should be removed from the press, because should it still be here and you have forgotten, this would be not a good thing to run through the press because it could damage the press. Also, we have set the pressure, and these are the micrometers here, and they must be equal. The pressure in this case for this type of printing doesn't need to be a lot. That's why even a very basic press would be fine, because we really don't need to have too much pressure. The ink is going to be right on the surface. This is going to be a dampened piece of only paper, and if there is too much pressure, what will happen is the paper will actually craze and break apart. So you do want a very sort of moderate pressure, and no need for a lot of pressure. It's wet paper to wet paper, so we'll get very, very good contact that way. So now we're ready to begin inking our Xerox print.